I'm sure that by now you would have heard about the protests that have taken the streets of China by surprise. And indeed, many people, many China watchers, including myself, were very surprised when this news broke out. I mean, protests in China, those three words just don't sound right. They haven't sounded right since 1989. So in this video, I just wanted to share my thoughts on why this is huge in terms of the future of China and the future of the world. And I want to share my predictions as to where these protests are gonna go, what the future events and the political scene in China is going to be like after this, and why I think everybody on planet Earth should care about what's happening in China and how things play out. So, firstly, I just wanted to quickly recap on what has happened that's led to the protests. So, basically, as you would know, the whole society of China has been living on a different planet for the last, if not 3 years, definitely the last 2 years. And they've been using zero COVID policy for the last 2 years, whereas the rest of the world has been gradually opening up to normal life, basically, opening up to tourism, opening up to economy, and international students and workers and businesses. But in China, for example, if you are on the same train with someone who gets diagnosed with COVID, unfortunately, it doesn't matter if you are 4 carriages down from them, your health code, which is this app that you have to install on your phone, will turn red or orange or whatever color they decide that fits the mood of the day. And essentially what that means is that you cannot travel anymore, and you have to get a certain number of COVID swabs in, say, 5 or 7 days consecutively, that all turn negative, and only then your code will turn green, and then you can travel. In some provinces like Xinjiang, which is like a western remote community of China, people have been forbidden from leaving their homes and their province and their local towns for like 6 months straight. And yeah, as you can imagine, that creates a lot of problems. And there has been abusing of this power on so many levels, from the state governments, the local governments, even like the community watchers. I don't know what to call them. In Chinese, we say 大白, like the big Ys. Like on news, you see those police or COVID policy enforcers wearing those ridiculous white colored hazmat suits. Yeah, we call them 大白, and it just means big white. And they would abuse their power because they are like one of the only groups of people whose jobs are not affected. And they can basically just do whatever they want to the rest of the people who have to be under constant lockdowns. So this has gone on for the last 2 years, 3 years, and not that long ago, people sensed a change in the political attitude towards zero COVID, because since this major meeting that the Communist Party of China had a couple of months ago, they have established this new policy called the 20 new rules of COVID, where essentially they said that, okay, maybe we want to gradually step away from ensuring zero COVID. Maybe we want to gradually open up the society and open up the COVID measures like the rest of the world. So people sense that there's going to be a loosening of the restraints, if you will. But let's just say that didn't happen. And when some of the cities and provinces try to open up, the central government got back to them and they said, no, that is not what we want. Okay, even though we said this, even though we said you can start to take some looser measures. The way you did it was wrong, and you're going to be punished. So basically, all the local governments got really confused, and the people also got really confused and frustrated. And at this time, as this frustration was building up, something happened in Xinjiang, and that was this fire occurred in a high-rise apartment block in Xinjiang, and as per the official news, 10 people died because, firstly, they could not escape from their homes because all the buildings were like locked down and they cannot escape. And secondly, because the whole community was locked down, the firefighters could not access the building that was on fire, and they tried to put out the fire by blasting the the fire with water from outside the gates of the community, but obviously they could not reach it, and people were just watching in horror as this fire gradually consumed the whole building. And yeah, nobody could do a thing because like you could not escape and you could not go to help. You could not, even the firefighters could not access the victims. So that shook the Chinese society to its core because that could happen to anybody. Like, what if your apartment catches on fire tomorrow, right? Like, so the confusion, the frustration, and the empathy people had towards the people who lost their lives in the fire, that was the ultimate straw that broke the camel's back. Like you would think, if people have not voiced major discontent in 3 years, maybe they would not voice their discontent forever. But I guess Chinese people are just fed up, So I think firstly you got people in Urumqi, which is the capital of Xinjiang. Some people went down streets and they said, we need this to end. We need to be able to save our lives when a fire happens like this. And then you got people in Shanghai, they took to the streets and they said, they did not even say, we want the COVID measures to end. They said, we want to express our sympathy to the people in Xinjiang, and we want to make sure that they will be safe. We want to make sure that their tragedy is known and is heard by the government. And that gradually became ugly, if we say, because some people started to shout words like Xi Jinping stepped down and Chinese Communist Party stepped down, and they were saying things like, we want freedom, we don't want any more lockdowns, we want rights, we don't want dictatorship. So some people got arrested overnight. But what's interesting is, and what's different from all the other protests that had happened in China in the last few decades since 1989, was that this happened in the same night in multiple cities in China. The ones that were more significant were Beijing, where people were gathered near this bridge in Beijing, and the protest went into like the next morning apparently. And then also on the streets of Chengdu, which is another major city in central China, people also gathered and they protested. And I believe the same thing happened at a lot of campuses in universities as well. Okay, so that's a basic recap of what has occurred so far. Where do I think things will go? I'm not very optimistic, I have to be honest, because if you look at Hong Kong, right? If you look at Hong Kong 2019, millions of people were on the streets. And that's not the same level as what has occurred in China so far. In China, it's been what, thousands of people, if not tens of thousands at most. But in Hong Kong, I think like half of the population went on the streets, and still, it didn't change a thing, did it? If anything, it accelerated Xi Jinping's crackdowns and how how Hong Kong could just turn from a democracy, well, semi-democracy, to to just another city of China, of the People's Republic of China. And that's tragic. And it just goes to show that it does not matter how many people go onto the streets. The Communist Party ultimately has ultimate power, and they can enforce their wills and their policies just by pure power. Yeah. So I think unless if by some miracle the military and the local Communist Party officials also decide to join with the people, if they are fed up with the central government somehow, maybe that's the only scenario where these protests can turn into major political change and a change of regime, if you will. But I really do not see that happening in the near future. I think what will happen is is in fact what has already been happening is that the Communist Party has cranked up um, its propaganda machine, and it's been blaming these protests on so-called Western influences. Apparently, they caught this journalist from BBC, and initially they wanted to say that he's a spy from US or UK or whatever, but then they realized that no, actually this guy is actually a reporter for BBC, and we probably would create even more scandal if we detain them. So yeah, we'll have to let him go. And they took this, I think, this one picture of this white girl in Chengdu or in Shanghai, and they said, oh, this girl must be a spy from CIA. It's just ridiculous, but it's the only official voice in China, so some people at least will believe it, which is just tragic and ridiculous. um, Okay, what else? So they will also try to get rid of any voices that they do not like online, and they would erase these protests from the public memory, like what they did to Tiananmen Square, and they have the means to do so because the whole internet, the whole media is controlled by them, and if they wanted to, they can shut down anybody's social media account if you even said anything that's remotely related to these incidents. You could ask a question about what happened. You could say, "Oh, how come yesterday I drove past this bridge in Beijing and there was like a bunch of people?" And your social media could be deleted, or at least this post would be deleted. Um, yeah, which is scary. And this is how China has been running the country. Well, I should say the Communist Party has been running the country for the last uh, 10 years, ever since Xi Jinping stepped into power. So, yeah, the democratic future for China is not um, optimistic, but it is hopeful because at least now we know that people have the guts to say what they really think, and to have and people are brave enough, at least some people are brave enough to take onto the streets to really express their discontent with the government, and that is really the most important thing in order for a democracy to eventually form. It will take time though, and it will take tens, dozens, hundreds more protests like this for the whole population of China to realize that things have to change, and the Communist Party will have to go away, or will have to change in a significant way, for our future as a country to be sustainable. Okay, so now let's talk about why, as someone who maybe lives in a Western society and who maybe does not have any connections to China, should also care about what happens with these protests and how the future of China is going to be like. So, firstly, I guess I just wanted to say we're talking about the future welfare of 1.4 billion people, 1.4 billion is the population of China, in case you didn't know. So yeah, by all means, if you are someone with empathy and respect for human well-being, then yes, you should care about what happens to the livelihood of 1.4 billion people, and also what happens in China in the future with regards to these protests. They will also have major impacts on things like international trade. Um, for example, I have been looking at buying an iPad, and what I've noticed is that the from when the new iPad was released and when they became available for purchase, there was a pretty long delay from when it was first announced and when they finally became available in Australia, where I am. And I suspect that has something to do with what happened in this factory called Foxconn in China. And in case you didn't know, Foxconn is like the most the largest assembler of Apple products in the world. So what happened there was that the workers were had enough with the lockdowns and the fact that they can only work at the factories and they could not go home or go into the community. So a lot of them just decided to not even care about their pay, and they just went home. Basically, they just decided, okay, we've had enough. We don't want to work here anymore. We're gonna go home. Basically, it was a strike. Yeah, and that might have delayed, the production of a lot of Apple's products. And yeah, if this continues to happen in the future, let's not forget China is a huge manufacturer. China is still a huge manufacturer of a lot of the world's electronics and smaller products. So yeah, if that's going to continue to happen, all these ridiculous COVID measures, then you're going to have to wait, half a year for your new iPhones, 12 months for your new cars, or even like, even the basic things like your laptops, your clothes, your shoes, all of that could be affected. Prices could go up, and you could be looking at really long delays for your commodities. And of course, that's not something we want to happen. We live in a capitalist society. I want to pay my money. I want my things now. I don't want to wait 12 months for it. All right. So apart from that, even though I do not think that these protests will lead to a democratic China in the near future, but let's say that happened. Okay, let's say in 5 years China becomes a democracy, or at least not so much of a authoritarian regime like it is now. Then China would not invade Taiwan, right? Yeah, that's important, isn't it? Because as um, from what we can see, that the way that the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping is going, I think he is going to invade Taiwan in the next 5 to 10 years. Yeah, that's a very significant possibility. I mean, nobody thought that Putin would have the guts to invade Ukraine, but he did. And let's just say the possibility of China invading Taiwan is a lot larger now than what people give credit for. That's what I believe. Okay, so if we want to avoid potential war and the loss of lives of thousands of people, then yeah, we also would want to continue to pay attention to the democratic future of China. And I guess apart from that, as someone who is from China, I'm from Beijing, we want to be able to travel to China freely. We don't want to have to get a COVID test every day and be in a hotel or home lockdown for 7 days before you can go into the community in China. I mean, don't you want to see the pandas in Sichuan, in Chengdu? Don't you want to go to the Great Wall? don't you want to go to the Forbidden City in Beijing? I've been there once, and it's magnificent. You know, there's so much history. The terracotta warriors in Xi'an. Yeah, we want to see all that, and as overseas Chinese, we want to be able to go home and see our family. Um, so for all those reasons, yeah, we want the COVID measures to end, and we want China to turn democratic, um, or at least more open in the near future. And last but not least, do you want another COVID? You don't, right? Let's not forget, COVID originated in Wuhan, in China. And if China was a democratic country with stricter and more transparent controls of their scientific facilities, there is a major chance that COVID would not have happened, right? They would have destroyed the samples properly if we buy into the lab leak. Not even a conspiracy anymore. This is a genuine theory. If I guess we had better control. China had better control of their wildlife cuisine markets. Then maybe the virus would not have jumped from bats to humans. Yeah, so if you don't want another COVID, you don't want to ignore what's happening in China. I think I've stated enough reasons to convince you why you should care about this protest in China. And if you do, what you can do is you can hold up a blank piece of A4 paper or stick it to your car or something. That's become the symbol for the protest in China, because the meaning behind that is that the Chinese censorship machine is so harsh that we cannot even say anything. So we're just going to hold up a blank piece of paper, and everybody knows what we're trying to say. What we're trying to say is we want freedom of speech. We want the COVID measures to end. We want freedom. We want the Chinese Communist Party to change or to end if possible. Okay, so that's my take on the protests in China. I hope it's been good information for you. I do follow Chinese politics and international politics closely, and I will talk about these topics more in the future. It is one of my passions apart from medicine.